With that said, I've hit all my topics here. Jimmy, let's go ahead and bring Captain Sally into our viewing screen here. Jimmy Kane is our director today. Jimmy was a club president back in 2017, and he's twisting all the wires and making this thing happen for us. So thank you, Jimmy, for helping out in that regard. So today we are very blessed to have Captain Sally Black. She owns the Baffin Bay Rod and Gun Club. I guess not club, just Rod and Gun Lodge is probably the more apt way to say that. And so Sally's been on the central and middle and lower coast for a number of years. And I first met her, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. I hosted a panel at some sort of fishing show in Austin that she was on, and I moderated that panel and watched her through Facebook through the years, and pleased to have her back on here. She's moved down into what I call my home waters, Baffin Bay. That's the holy land for speckled trout fishing. So we've had a number of state record fish being caught out of there, and currently the state record's in the lower Laguna. I don't want to rob too much of your speech, but if you want to catch a trophy trout, you go to Baffin Bay. So Captain Sally is, one of the top experts in the state on fly fishing on the coast. And so if she's not the top, it's in the top 2 or 3. That's all, of course, very subjective on there, but she could certainly be in the top 2 or 3 fly fishing guides on the Texas coast. So with that said, thank you for joining us today, Captain Sally. She's in her backyard. It's 80 degrees down there in Rivera Beach, and she's here to tell us about Baffin Bay and fishing and hunting, for that matter, out of Baffin Bay. Welcome, Captain Sally.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it a lot. I'm the one that's blessed to be giving this presentation to you and your club. Thank you for having me back. I probably have done a couple of presentations to y'all back in the day. And I've been a fishing guide and a hunting guide since 1998. And I started in Rockport. And that's probably how a lot of y'all got to know me early on in my career as a fly fishing guide. I pulled a boat down there for a long, long time. And then I saw the writing on the wall. It was getting kind of crowded down there. And I made my way down to Baffin Bay and met and married the love of my life. And he and I, Aubrey Black, created this beautiful place called Baffin Bay Rod and Gun. And all of us down here are 100% focused and addicted on trophy trout. And my talk today is going to be about our pursuit of the record and why this place is so perfect for the next state record to come out of. So I've got a little presentation here. I'll get started with that, if that's all right with y'all. And that's me proudly holding a beautiful 30-incher. And a lot of people talk about trophy trout and what is a trophy trout? What does that mean? And in most bay systems, it's 28 inches and above. But in Baffin Bay, 30 is the new 28. So all of our rods have 30-inch marks and 32-inch marks because that's a pretty standard fish down here on Baffin Bay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and the reasons why Baffin Bay produces all these gigantic trout. So here is the current holder of this Texas state record. Now, there's a little debate here because Bud Rowland, who is a friend of mine, and I know him personally, and I know he caught this fish. However, he was in pursuit of an IGFA world record, which means he's got a certified boga grip, and he has 2 witnesses to this catch. And then he released the fish. But in the great state of Texas, the rule is that you must bring the fish to a certified weigh station to have it certified as a Texas state record, which Bud did not do. However, the plot thickens. And so his friends lobbied the state to make an exception to the rules and allow this fish to be considered the new Texas state record. And it's one heck of a fish, let me tell you. But there will probably be a little conflict if somebody catches a fish slightly bigger than Jim Wallace's fish from 1994, which I'm fixing to show you. And because of the way that the rules were stretched, let's say. So here's how it all got started on Baffin Bay. A man by the name, a dapper gentleman by the name of Mike Blackwood, brought in this 13-pound, 9-ounce trout. And it was certified as probably one of the first Texas state records. And this is the lure that he caught it on. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a pretty standard little lure. And this was in 1975, I believe. And it was such an important deal, Mike Blackwood wore a suit for the picture. Now, this is one of the most dapper fishing pictures I've ever seen. And then this is my friend Jim Wallace. He's no longer with us, but this is the record in Baffin Bay that everybody is chasing. 13 pounds, 11 ounces. And he did bring this fish into a certified weigh station. And this was a long time ago. I mean, we call it the cast heard around the world because one of his buddies, Paul Brown, came up with this lure and he called it a corky. And he gave a bunch of these corkies to Jim Wallace and his buddies, and they went out fishing that day. And I heard the story directly from Jim Wallace's mouth, how he and his friends were fishing, and they were fishing at night in February, and it was really cold. And they were running behind the tide gauge bar, and he showed me exactly where he caught this fish. And it wasn't just this fish. They caught 10 fish each, a lot like this fish. And it was just a big school of giant trout hanging out in shallow water behind the tide gauge bar on a cold February night. But he caught it on the corky. And now everybody knows that the corky is just world famous for trophy trout fishing. I personally don't use a lot of corkies. I don't know why. I've just never been a corky fisherman. The old rule on the corky fishing in the wintertime is that a dead man can't work a corky too slow. So maybe that's why I'm not a big corky fisherman. I don't have that kind of patience. But people that like to throw corkies are very, very successful in catching big trout on Baffin Bay. So honestly, this is the record that everybody is chasing. And I hope it's me or someone here at the lodge or one of our guides or one of our clients, because, we'll have a little publicity on that and it'll be a lot of fun. I guarantee you. So it's been a long time since Bud Rowland caught that fish. And he calls it the big lady. He caught it on a fly, sight casting, down in the lower Laguna Madre. And it's time to break that record. And, Baffin Bay is so unique. And we'll talk a little bit about why Baffin Bay is the system most capable of producing this new state record. And you can see on this slide that Baffin is really unique in many, many, many ways. And it runs east and west versus the rest of the bay systems in Texas that generally run north and south. So this bay goes right into the land. And as you can see, there are no lakes or rivers or any fresh water feeding this system. The closest Gulf inlet would be Corpus Christi, which is about an hour and 45 minutes away from the north. And the other closest Gulf inlet would be Port Mansfield, which is a couple of hours to the south. So tide doesn't make it to Baffin Bay. So this is a landlocked hypersaline lagoon with no tide. And then you think to yourself, what? How do I fish it? And when I moved here from Rockport, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, okay, I'm a tidal fisherman. I follow the tide all day long, sight casting the redfish. So now I come to Baffin, trophy trout capital of the world, no tide. So I really had to give it some in-depth thought. And it took a little while, but Baffin is so unique. And the reason the trout get so big here is because there is no tide. because things don't change a lot, because there's no fresh water coming in. And because of that, the fish don't move a whole lot. They certainly don't leave Baffin Bay. So they eat, grow, and procreate all in this one spot. And even though it's hypersaline, the species of trout here have simply adapted to a high saline level. Baffin Bay is such a treasure because it is protected by the King Ranch on the north and the Kennedy Ranch on the south. No condos, no boat ramps, no power lines. Okay, the Kennedy does have some stupid old windmills, but overall, it is so encased by territory that probably looks a lot like it did 500 years ago, which is so cool. It's just such a treasure to be there in that kind of an atmosphere. So there's a lot less people here. And, you know, on most days you can go around and maybe see 2 boats, maybe, or 5 boats on a Saturday. And that's really one of the things that I love the most about this bay. There's one little strip of humanity on the back of the bay, and our lodge is on the Cayo de Grullo, which is the little, I'll go back if I can figure out how to go back to the map right here. So our lodge is in the Cayo de Grullo, which is the northern little strip of humanity. And there's the other little one is called the Laguna Salada. And you can see that's where the little houses are and farms and such. And everything else is completely uncivilized, so to speak, non-civilized. So lack of fishing pressure. Everybody knows about the rocks in Baffin. They're generally made by the casings of serpulid worms. And you're like, what? Serpulid what? So all of the rocks in Baffin are generally made by the casings of a serpulid worm. So they're not really rocks. It's more like a coral reef. And they're in the middle of the bay. There's huge formations. They're shallow, they're deep, they're long, big long stretches. There's piles in the middle of the bay that you can actually wade fish on. So it's so unique because I don't think there's any other place, maybe someplace in Russia, I think, has these serpulid worms. But anyway, and then along the mouth of Baffin Bay, there's another type of rock, and it's a coquina sedimentary rock, and it's an ancient Gulf beach. And those rocks, which you can see on this picture, are gigantic. And this is some of that ancient Gulf beach. And some of the spoil islands on the intercoastal out there at the mouth, you can find fossilized sand dollars, fossilized sea anemone. It's very cool. So that's the rocks kind of are scary. I've lost a couple lower units, and I know it's the old saying on Baffin Bay is it's not if you're going to lose a lower unit, it's when you're going to lose a lower unit. So those rocks, it's for real. And but once you kind of know where they're at and have it marked on your GPS, it gives you a little bit more security, not total, because there's uncharted rocks all over the place. And we already talked about the King and the Kennedy Ranch just enveloping this bay system. And then the constant level of salinity is a reason that the fish like to stay here. They've adapted to it and they don't leave, which is a real unique thing. Like it doesn't change much. It's very, very stable. And so the fish don't need, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but the fish don't need to move around a lot to find their optimum metabolism area. And Baffin Bay is a great place because it has already produced 2 of the last 3 state records. So we have a good friendship with some of the people that do the biological surveys here on Baffin. And we've learned a lot about the reason that Baffin Bay is so cool. And here's a little article by Shannon Tompkins, who writes for the Houston Chronicle. And he just talks about, the fact that the place is so unique in that it has no water flow. And speckled trout have adapted to this. And as a matter of fact, they do a lot of tagging in Corpus at the Heart Institute. And I talked to the man that runs that, Greg Stuns. And I asked him, I said, you know, those big trout tournaments where they have a live release. So the guys come down here and they catch the trophy trout on Baffin, and then they go to Corpus for the live weigh-in. And then after the live weigh-in, they just release those fish back into the bay in Corpus, which is maybe 35 parts per thousand salinity, and Baffin Bay is maybe 55. So it's a different salinity. And I asked him, what happens to those fish? He said, Sally, they swim back to Baffin. So that is one of the coolest things, that these fish have adapted to this area so hard that they seek it. And then Faye Grubbs is the lady from Parks and Wildlife that I would call her the one of the very top experts on Baffin Bay. And I speak with her quite frequently. And so she's, you know, one of her things is that it's a very exaggerated system. Everything grows bigger here. The redfish grow bigger. The trout, of course, grow bigger. You'll find 30-inch mullet in this bay. And there's more mullet here than you can walk across the bay on mullet sometimes. And that mullet is the main food source here on Baffin. So every once in a while, there might be shrimp here. Every once in a while, croaker fishing is effective here. But generally, all of these fish eat mullet. So in her words, homeostasis is the word that she uses. So homeostasis means a fish doesn't have to keep moving around to seek its optimum place to live. So let's say a fish in Rockport, the tide comes in. The fish is acclimated to a certain salinity. The tide comes in, less salinity, the fish moves, expends a lot of energy moving. The tide goes out, more salty water comes out of the back bays into the main bay where the fish is. The fish has to move. So you can see what I'm talking about. These fish and other bay systems have to move back and forth, can keep on moving, whereas nothing ever changes here on Baffin Bay. The conditions generally stay the same. So the fish just get lazy, eat, grow, and procreate. That's the one and only reason that, and plus the gigantic amount of food that's here, is the reason that fish get bigger here. And even redfish don't leave here. So in other bay systems, redfish come and go. When they get to be 27, 28, 29, 31 inches, they gather up in September. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have participated in redfish rodeos in Rockport or Port Mansfield or Port O'Connor. And these fish gather up and they go offshore and they don't come back. So they stay offshore and they get huge, and that's where they do all their spawning, and their babies come back into the system. But in Baffin Bay, those fish don't leave. So we've got these huge herds of these 50, 60-inch redfish that actually don't go offshore and live out the rest of their lives. They actually stay in Baffin Bay. And it's so unique. So it's easy to catch 55, 60-inch redfish, and sometimes even sight cast to them in shallow water with half their bodies out of the water, even on the fly. So, you know, when's the best time really to target a trophy trout? Well, when they're fattening up for the spawn. That's one time. And the spawn happens in the spring when the water temperature rises to 75 or 80 and stays there. So between now and maybe early June, the fish are doing two things. One, they're eating up for the winter to survive. Once they survive the winter and the water temperature starts to rise, they get the signal from Mother Nature that they need to start eating up for their spawn. So they need to gain a lot of body fat to be able to spawn. Trout don't have muscles to expel their eggs. They kind of beat themselves on the bottom to expel their eggs. So they've got to have a lot of energy. So as the winter goes on, and then the water temperature starts to rise in the spring, another big giant feeding happens. So as that goes, the fish just keep getting bigger and bigger and fatter and heavier. And so right before the spawn is the optimum time to catch the heaviest trophy trout. Although in the all winter long, you can catch a big heavy fish. And we caught 8 and 9 pound trout all summer long this year. So it can be done any time of the year, but the optimum heaviest fish will be right before the spawn. When the water temperatures and water temperatures on Baffin tell the fish a lot of things. Like right now, water temperatures dropping means winter is coming. So after their lazy, fat, do nothing summer, where Mother Nature told them nothing, now the water temperature is dropping and they're getting the signal that they need to start eating to survive the winter. And then the moon phases. You know, Baffin doesn't have a tide. So now what do? Well, we use the solunar table a lot. Moon phases and feeding periods. The new moon is much more productive for bigger fish feeding during the day than the full moon. The solunar feeding periods, the majors and the minors, which, you know, I'm not a scientist, but I've sort of gotten into it because it really matters. So you can go to I have an app called iSolunar, and it tells me when the moon is directly above my head or directly below my feet, that's a major feeding period. Major meaning that it lasts longer. If the moon is on either horizon, that's a minor feeding period, which means it might last an hour and a half versus a 2.5 hour major. So these 4 times of the day, and I think it works with deer or any other animal, are really a key to those fish to begin to feed. And if you're paying attention to all of these things, you don't want to be running around the bay. I call it prospecting during majors or minors. So you want to be places where you know the fish are. Another key is finding the biggest concentrations of bait in the system. So especially in the winter, this is so important. You have to have bait in the area that you're. When I say bait, I'm talking mullet. If you are fishing in an area and there are no mullet at all, nothing moving, I would suggest you keep looking. In the wintertime, one mullet jumping tells you everything you need to know. When the water is cold, nothing really wants to jump. So mullet jumping might signify a predator is about. So that would be a key for you to cast your lure in that area. Not just once, but a lot, because things move a little slower in the winter. So colder water means moving slower, moving your lure presentation is slower. This is an in-depth talk, so I hope you're following along, and I hope that there's some questions I can answer. So this is a little video, but I want to talk about where to find a trophy in the winter, which we are going into the winter right now. So the concentrations of bait, number one, most big fish are in waist deep to knee deep water, believe that or not. So you're looking for shallower water concentrations of bait fish. And when you find that, that would be a key. Also, you want to look for places that have a little bit of topography, maybe an area that's got some deep water, maybe some rocks, shallow grass, sand, and a drop off, which would give fish all of the areas that they might be comfortable with during that period of time. So if the water's a little colder, they might be hanging off the edge. If the water's a little colder, they might be in the deeper rocks. If the sun is shining, they might be up on the sand or grass. All of these things are just, as time goes by, you kind of learn to read the water. I call it reading the water. Mother Nature and fish will give you a lot of tips on what to do, especially mullet jumping. And I don't know how many of y'all have caught a 10-pound trout, but this is a little video of a 10-pound trout being caught and a kind of a funny landing method. I'm going to go ahead and play it right now. I'm hoping that you can see that. All right, here he comes, coming to hand. Oh no, it's getting kind of hairy. Oh, it's not hooked very well, as you can see. My friend Darren kind of loses his cool and drops his boga grip and reaches down and gives the 10-pounder a bear hug, because this is the biggest fish he's ever caught in his life, and gives it a big old kiss. And this is not how I recommend landing a giant trout. You want to handle them as less as possible. We use boga grips. I don't use a net. A lot of people do, and that's okay. But these big fish have a big protective kind of slimy coating that is really important to keep on them, and try not to keep them out of the water for super extended periods of time. Although you got to get a good fish picture, because if you don't have a picture, it didn't happen. So here's my bud Darren with it was a 32-inch fish, and it was 10 pounds. And I heard him tell this story the other day. We were doing a podcast with Cable Smith, Lone Star Outdoor Show, and he was telling Cable about this fish, and he said it was 33 inches long. So it's grown an inch since Darren caught that fish, and that's okay. You can, when I get a kiss for helping him get that fish together. Anyway, I hope you got a kick out of that little video. I love watching it, and I love hearing that story over and over and over. Every time I'm with Darren, I hear that story. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about what do you need? Like, what kind of lures do you need? Everybody loves to catch big fish on top water, but sometimes that's not happening. You know, if you don't see action on top, everybody wants to start out with the top water. I'm a little bit more of a plastics person. I want to find out if the fish are there right off the bat. And so I probably am going to use a paddle tail. Sometimes I use straight tail lures. When it's a little colder, I like to use bigger bodied paddle tails, like the paddle tails on the left. They're called they're made by Saltwater Assassin, and they're called Didappers. They're 5-inch, kind of heavy bodied paddle tails. And what I like about them is they act a lot like a corky. I use, I'm going to show something to y'all. I use these hooks, Black's Magic, our own hooks, of course. They're 1/32 of an ounce, and they're on number 1 hooks, and they have a screw lock. And what makes these lures, hooks so great, and you can see they're pretty small, and whatever kind of lure you're using, like here's a paddle tail on a 1/32 with the number 1 hook. You might want to use something bigger like this, like a flapping shad, or this is a Willowtail by Kelly Wigglers. That's also another great lure with lots of action. One of the real benefits of using this smaller hook, besides a more natural presentation, a lighter lure is a much more natural presentation, because you use an 1/8 ounce or a number 3 hook, which is what most people use. So this is a number 1 hook. A number 3 hook would probably come out about, I don't know, a 1/2 inch farther down the body of this lure. So then all you've got is this part of the lure working versus this part of the lure working. So you see, if you have a shorter shanked hook, your lure has much more action. Just imagine that. I wish I would have had a bigger hook. I just don't use them anymore, so I don't have one. So that's another benefit of using a shorter shanked hook, especially if you're going to use it on a Willowtail. Watch where it comes out on this lure, and I'm going to screw it on because that really makes it better. So look at all the lure action you have here versus a number 3 hook, which would come out about right here and only give you this much action versus this. Big difference. And so those bigger bodied lures you can use with this hook, or any shorter shanked hook, or a 1/32, if you can find it. will always give you a more natural presentation. Nothing in the universe over there drops like a rock. So if you're using one of these light hooks, what I do is I cast it out, and then as soon as that lure hits the water, I raise my rod tip ever so slightly, and it makes my lure drop like this versus like this. So I get a lot of strikes on that first drop. All those big fish like to hit on the drop. So I'll use that rod tip and that light hook and that light presentation with that heavier bodied paddle tail and keep it low and slow. And low and slow is where those great big mamas hang out. They're like a big dog versus a little dog. Little dogs run around all the time. You throw the ball, they'll go get it, they'll chase it. A big dog will lay there, and when the ball gets close, the big dog will go get it. So these big fish don't expend a lot of unnecessary energy. So if you're making a presentation low and slow, lifting your lure, making that paddle give a vibration, brrr, let it drop nice and slow. Lift it, let it drop. Lift it, let it drop. Like your lure is swimming along the bottom, and you will entice big fish to strike. A lot of people don't fish slow enough. Like in a lot of other bay systems, Port Mansfield, Rockport, Port O'Connor, you're fishing a lot of big grass flats and you're moving real fast and you're moving your lure fast because there's a lot of shrimp there. And that's a main target of those fish down in those grass flats is shrimp. Well, here, the main target of these great big trout are mullet. And trout can eat 2/3 their body length. So that great big old paddle tail or that big porky, that's just a snack to those big girls. But they don't want to expend a lot of energy. So you kind of got to get it close to them, and working it low and slow is just a secret of the game. Also you need the right stuff like rod, line, and gear. Everybody talks to me about rods, line, and gear. I use the lightest products on the market. I use a Sarge custom rod built just for me. It's called the Priest. I think you should rename it the Priestess. But anyway, it's a 6'6" medium light, super light rod.
Captain Sally, I'm going to step in here. We've got a few questions that have come up over the last little bit. First and foremost, my question is, where do you buy a Black's Magic lead head?
Okay, you can buy it online on our website, Baffin Bay Rod and Gun. There's a shop there. You can buy it. Okay. Also, it's at Roy's Bait and Tackle. And Roy's Bait and Tackle.
What isn't at Roy's? Is there something that's not at Roy's?
It's $100 bill every time you walk in there. I don't care who you are. And yes.
So
and you can also get it at Town in Rockport. And there's a place in the valley that you can. Mm-hmm.
Oh. Awesome. So you're talking about the baits come up and down. Do you ever incorporate Mansfield Mauler into your arsenal of tackle to help that action of going up and down?
Well, you know what? That really works well with beginner fishermen, particularly. We use Cajun Thunder popping corks. And I'll put the Gulp swimming mullet, 4-inch swimming mullet on that Black's Magic hook, and maybe give it about an 18-inch drop leader. And so for beginners that aren't really comfortable, let's say, with certain presentations, that's a great way to start. And that popping cork is magic. So yeah, absolutely.
And then lastly, before I let you get back to your presentation, Kevin McConnell wants to know, unrelated to what you've said so far to date, but how did Hurricane Hannah affect Baffin Bay other than wiping out a few dozen derelict floaters?
Right. Well, it was about a 12-hour cleanup in my yard, and I lost some landscaping, but no, it was about 100 miles an hour for about 4 hours. And the main brunt of the dam was down in the land. So there's a lot of wiped out cabins down there. And but here it was just a bunch of docks. But no, it was just a standard blow. So it didn't
And
affect Baffin at all.
any change to the water itself? Any new sandbars,
No, it
holes?
just was no, it wasn't that strong. So what happened here was it blew all day long from the west, which is a direction across the land basically, and it was about 50 to 80 miles an hour most of the day. And then when that storm came in a little south of us, the wind switched to the east, and that's what did all the damage to all the docks on the bay. But that was about it. We had a little surge from the wind, and but the main core of the damage was south of here. So no, but Baffin Bay does change all the time. There, sand moves around. I've seen a lot of change on Baffin in the last couple of years. But the water is beautiful, and we've got lots and lots of grass.
Good. Okay. Thank you. I'll let you get back to your presentation.
And I was just kind of talking about rods and line and reels. I'm using the hold on. I just picked it up. The Lew's Custom Light. If you want to throw a rod and reel that is super light, I cast so many. I want the lightest products on the market that can withstand the salt water of Baffin. So this Lew's Custom Light is a dream come true, I want to tell you. And I don't think it's very expensive. And I have used mono, actually some kind of a polymer line. I use Suffix, which is a polymer line of sorts. It's not mono. It's pretty limp. It doesn't have a lot of memory. But recently, I got talked into putting braid on this Lew's Custom Light. And so there is a learning curve because I'm used to the stretch, and I haven't used braid in a long. I think the last time I used braid was in 2005. So I'm trying braid, and there is a little bit of a learning curve because there is no stretch. But it's been fun. It's been a fun project. I'm not totally sold, but anyway, keeping it light, keeping it simple, not too much stuff. Take colors with you, dark and light. So purple and chartreuse has been just magic. Anything lighter than that, keep a couple of, jig heads in your pockets, light lures, some dark lures, maybe a top water like a skitterwalk or a one knocker spook. I use an over the shoulder box built by Feral Concepts. You might look into them. That's really simple, and I hook all my stuff onto it. So I've got my stringer hooked onto it. I've got my Boga grip hooked onto it. I use some real easy fly use cutter, and I have that hooked to my shirt, so I'm running real light. Everything I'm doing is really super light. I have very comfortable boots on, and I wear the right clothes, and I don't want to be cold. So I invest in expensive gear. And the thing about expensive gear, granted, there's upfront cost, but that stuff lasts a long time, and you're going to stay dry, and you'll be able to layer up, and you won't be cold. So part of taking all of that out of the picture, it lets you focus more on your target, which is catching a trophy trout. So I don't want to be thinking about being cold. I don't want to be thinking if I forgot something. I don't want to be thinking about my bad reel that's not working right. I want to keep all of my focus on reading the water, being in the right place, reading the water, making the correct presentation to where I know trophy fish are hanging out. Sorry about that. Anyway, time on the water, that goes without saying. I've been a guide for, this is going to be my 23rd year. So I have a lot in my memory bank about fishing, and that helps a lot. So when you do it a lot, you're always prepared for whatever happens. When you only do it once a month, it makes it kind of tough. So that's where listening to your fishing or your buddies that fish a lot comes in handy. After getting ready for trophy trout, I'm a big hunter. I don't know if y'all know that or not, But I love dove hunting and I love duck hunting. I love spending all day long with my good dog Cinder, and she's 3 years old this year, professionally trained. And she's just a hoot and a half to be with. And we're getting ready for duck season this weekend. Is opening weekend for us, and I'll be out Sunday. And, my dog is just prepped and ready to go because we had a fantastic dove hunting season here. We still have tons of dove, and I know the split is going to be fabulous. So you can put 2 and 2 together. You can, the dove season and the duck season overlap. So one of my favorite things to do, duck hunt in the morning, dove hunt in the afternoon, a blast and mast. So if you want to do something like that, give me a call. A great place to stay here down at the lodge. We have great food. We have a great staff. All of our guides are fun and funny, and we're all teaching guides. And we really, really, really love to host families, beginners, and hardcore guys and girls. I know a lot of hardcore girls. I didn't mean to be taking them out of the picture. I've been doing it for so long, I call everybody a guide. But anyway, if you want to come down and learn about targeting trophy trout from now till the early part of June, come on the new moon. Work with me on the moon phases. Start looking at stuff like that. You want to be about 3 days past a big front. Pre-front fishing is a dream come true. So having time everything like that, sometimes it's really difficult and you can't get away. Sometimes we have opening. You can call and say, hey, what's it like down there? Can I come in a couple of days? What do you think? And if we can fit you in, we surely will. We sleep 20 people here at the lodge, and it's a real comfortable atmosphere. It's like home. And we made it to be easygoing. We have a full bar. We have a beer on tap all the time. Like I said, we have great staff. We all have new boats, and all of our guides here have lots and lots of experience. So whether you like to duck hunt and fish, that would be called the blast and cast. You could do a cast and blast, duck, fish and dove hunt, or a blast, duck hunt and dove hunt. So there's a million things to do down here. And once everybody comes here, they never want to leave. And I feel the same way. I love this place. And Baffin Bay is a real treasure that you should definitely experience. It's not very far away from San Antonio and Austin either. So come on down and chill out on Baffin Bay. And by the way, we're a COVID-free zone. Just want to let you know. The only COVID-free zone I know.
Excellent presentation. Love seeing all your pictures, videos, all that. That was fantastic. We have one more question that has come up. Charles R. wants to know, how will the trout like the noise from the Boca Chica spaceport?
Oh, that's pretty far south. That's pretty far south from here. That would be a couple hours maybe, or 3.
Yep.
South
it's
of
probably
that.
100 miles, yeah.
Long way.
Yeah.
So the people that fish South Bay, Port Isabel, down there, that's part of their program. And I like to fish down there. I like to go snook fishing with Ernest Cisneros, and
he's awesome.
He's an awesome dude. I'm gonna fish with him this coming week. So he and I fish for fun together. And you gotta like to wade fish in the mud though to catch a snook. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do it anymore. As an almost 60-year-old man, I did it about 15 years ago with him and kept up, and we caught some decent snook, and that was a heck of a trip. Very memorable, that's for sure. So,
well, I caught my first snook with him this past summer, 28.
Nice. Very nice.
It was cool. Nice. It was very cool.
Okay, and wrapping up here, I remember 15 years ago when I moderated this panel and Captain Sally was on it. She had something. I had just gotten married. This was in 2005. I had just gotten married, and my wife was out in the audience. And Sally had a saying that's really stuck in our family ever since then for the last 15 years. And her saying or motto or whatever was, families that fish together stay together. And we've kept that in mind and utilized that throughout our marriage and as my daughters come in and into our lives. And so it's quite a saying. I'm glad you offered that to us. And we continue to say that, and it definitely works, no doubt about it. It's up here in Bee Cave, Texas, just on the west side of Austin. If you haven't heard about that, Sally, it's a fantastic event. Scott McGuire and Trey Rebb, who are members of our club, are the promoters of that event. And it's all about getting the fly fishing community of Austin, whether it be fresh or saltwater, to get together and have a day. And the Flames, of course, is barbecue. So there's got some fantastic barbecue and wonderful beer, the Aircraft beer. And Woods and Waters had a table there. Matter of fact, we gave away a membership. We had about 50 people stop by our table. And Wyatt Simmons got the free membership. Wyatt, if you're listening, we'll reach out to you and get you your membership. But anyway, Sally, I'll hook you and Scott McGuire and Trey Webb up. It's an event that they produce, and they do a really cool job. It's a fantastic environment and thing, and something I highly recommend. You will like being a part of that.
I'd love that.
Yeah, I'll give you an introduction and send you some Facebook links and all that kind of good stuff there.
Great.